everyone, so I'm hanging out in the garden today and I figured I would go through some of the most commonly asked questions I get about my garden. Now I did post on the community tab if you had any questions to let me know, so I pulled from there, and also just from questions I get a lot in general, whether on YouTube videos or comments on Instagram. But I have my list right here on my phone and I figured we'd go ahead and jump into it. Now, the most commonly asked question I think that I've gotten asked over the last few years is either, do I care about damaging the deck, or are there certain things that I do to prevent damaging the deck? And I would say in general, yes, I care about it, but I don't go to such an extreme that I don't expect to have any damage. Obviously, if I'm out here gardening, I have my raised beds, I have a bunch of pots, I know there's going to be some wear and tear that happens to the deck, and that's not something that I try to 100% avoid. Now, ideally, we will be here for at least a decade or two. So I think, if it ever comes time that we would sell our home, we'd probably have to redo the decks anyway. I mean, the weather here is just very extreme, so there's going to be damage that happens to the deck anyway. But I do try to avoid causing any damage kind of outside of the normal wear and tear, if that makes sense. So for example, before I put anything heavy up here, I figured out the deck capacity, which I didn't even really know exactly what that was, but I knew I had to figure out if I'm gonna have raised beds filled with soil, am I gonna cause any sort of damage? So definitely figure out your deck capacity to make sure you aren't doing any larger, more structural damage to your house. I don't want my garden to fall through to the room below. Also, if I notice I'm doing something that does cause damage that I can avoid, I will try to do that. So for example, I dragged the large grow bags that I grow my tomatoes in. I think it was the first year we were here. I dragged that with the tomato cage in it, and then I realized the tomato cage was poking kind of through the bottom of the grow bag and scratched a part of the deck. So after realizing that, I no longer drag those around, or if I do, I make sure that the cage is lifted enough that it's not scratching up the deck. Some other things I've gotten asked about was any sort of water damage from the containers or the grow bags sitting on the deck, and honestly, I haven't noticed any. So for the most part, I do feel like my containers get moved around relatively frequently, so especially at the beginning when I'm trying to move them into the sun, but there are some grow bags that just kind of stay where they are, and I haven't noticed like any sort of discoloration or damage just from the grow bags sitting on the decks. Again, this will be my third year, so it might just be I haven't noticed anything yet, but if I do notice any damage, I will let you know. The elevated beds, they're where they are. I don't know if we ever eventually move them. Will I see any damage? Maybe, but that isn't something I've come across yet. Although I do know that if you want to, be safe about leaving anything that's kind of soaked in water sitting on the deck, you can get those plastic, like large saucers and put grow bags on top of that. But that's not something I do. It's not something I've really come to notice as an issue yet. A next question was, where do I get my garden hats from? So wearing a hat has kind of become necessary for me in the garden. The sun is bright up here and I prefer to wear a hat rather than sunglasses. I don't know why. I should probably be wearing both. This one that I'm wearing now is my newest hat. I don't want to say this in front of my other hats, but probably my favorite just because of the string. So this one I got from Chesterton Feed and Garden. I don't know the brand of it. I'll put that in the description below once I take this off and look at it. But the reason it's my favorite is because of this string. So it does get windy up here. I have had my hats fly off my head, luckily not off of the deck completely yet. But this is probably going to be my most worn this year. Now my most worn last year, which I still do wear, is this one right here, and it is from ASOS. The brand is actually ASOS itself. So ASOS is an online clothing store. They carry different brands, but also their own brand. I've probably had this for at least 2 years, so I don't know if they still carry it on their website, but it's worth looking into. Another reason I prefer this one a little bit more over this one is that the holes in the hat let more sunlight through, so it doesn't block the sun quite as effectively as this hat does, but I still really like it. And then this one is actually my mom's, and I think it might be older than me. There isn't a brand, it just says it's 100% paper and one size, but this is also a hat that I really like to wear. It's probably what I would consider like my cutest hat, but this one just got from a family member. So if you do have any family members that have gardened in the past and don't longer need their hats, feel free to ask if you can take some of theirs. Next on my list of questions is, have the handles broken off my grow bags due to weight or anything else? So yes, I'd say of the grow bags that I have, 2 or 3 so far I've had a handle tear off. One of them happened last year when I was just moving it around. One of the handles ripped off, not both of them. And then this spring so far I've noticed 2 more. I've only noticed them so far on my beige, smaller grow bags, not my larger black grow bags. And they are 2 different brands. So it could be either I move my beige bags around more often because they're smaller and I'm able to move them and I just use the handles more, or it could be that the black bags are better quality. So I'll link both of the ones down below that I get. To me, because the bags are so cheap, it's not a huge deal if the handles break off of them. I feel like for the most part anyway, I can just like lift around the edge of the bag and the handles aren't a necessity. But if that is something that you wouldn't want to have happen, it does seem like the beige bags from VivoSun, I've lost handles on them. But again, it's only been 3 out of 20 to 30 bags that I do have. And I don't think it's from weight. I think it's just from general wear and tear, because even though the one last year happened when I was picking up a bag, the ones I've noticed this spring, there's nothing in them. I can just tell that the handles are starting to fray. So I think it's more of a wear and tear issue, not specifically a weight issue. But even the ones that are, so my grow bags that are heavy, I'm mostly just pushing those around, not necessarily grabbing them by the handles. So long explanation for, yes, some of the handles have broken off. Kind of going along with that, what size grow bags do I use the most often? And I do find that different sizes work for different things, but the ones that I kind of find myself gravitating mostly towards are 7-gallon. So in general, I have 5-gallon, 7-gallon, 10-gallon, and 3 30-gallon. The 30-gallon are the ones that I feel like I have to use for my tomato plants. I have grown 2 tomato plants in one of the 30-gallon, but the root system takes up almost all of the 30-gallon bags that I have. So some of those like that serve a purpose for a specific plant type, but obviously because they're much larger, if I had more than the 3 that I have now, I don't know where I would put them. So those really large ones do serve a purpose for a specific type of plant. But for the rest of the plants, I mean, I'd say when I'm looking online, if I'm not used to growing something in a container and I look up a certain container size, it usually says like 5-gallon plants are happy in. So even though I have 5-gallon, I still just kind of find myself gravitating more towards 7-gallon, but I don't know if that would necessarily mean what I have in a 7-gallon wouldn't work in a 5-gallon. I think I like the larger ones just because, one, it gives them a little bit more room, 2 gallons more room, and they don't dry out quite as fast, again, because they are a little bit larger. And I think I prefer 7 over 10-gallon, just again, space-wise. 7 gallons a little bit smaller than the 10-gallon, but it doesn't mean that something I grow in a 7 wouldn't grow perfectly fine in a 5 or 10-gallon as well. Next question, do I have a drip irrigation system set up into my garden? And yes, I do. Last year was the first year I had an irrigation system. It is the best decision by far I've ever made for my garden, because I would get so stressed out the 2 previous years, 2019, 2020, of making sure I got out and watered my garden once every morning, and then if it was really hot, coming out again in the afternoon before the plants started to wilt. Now, I wake up and my garden is watered. I mean, there were some plants that I didn't have hooked up to the drip system last year, so there was still some stuff that I had to go out and manually water. But this year, my plan is to get almost everything, or everything that I can, hooked up to a drip system. So I actually tried out 2 different irrigation systems last year. One was in this main garden, and that was the Proven Winners drip system, or drip kit. It was recommended by Garden Answer, so I went ahead and got it. And then the other one was from a brand I found on Amazon called Carpathian. I think that's how you pronounce it. I'll link that below as well. And they were both a little bit different. So the Proven Winners one, well, let me say first of all, I always kind of felt like setting up one of these drip systems would be really overwhelming, and I feel like that's one of the reasons I was putting it off. But once I actually started getting into it, it's very, very simple to just set up the tubing, cut where you want, put in the drip tube to where it needs to go to the plant, and then move on to the next plant. So the Proven Winner system has like little emitters that release just a tiny drip at a time. Because of that, it does take longer to get the plants a good amount of water to keep them saturated or give them enough water that they need. So I think when I used the drip, it was running between 20 to 30 minutes every morning. Sometimes I would run it again on really hot days, but that wasn't a regular occurrence. So that's the one I used in this garden. And then I used the Carpathian in the back for some melon plants that did not fit in here. And those emitters are a little bit different. They look like this, and I don't think technically this is a drip system because it's not dripping out like the Proven Winners one was. This one, and this is actually something I've seen more often, is where you kind of twist up or down depending on how much water you want released. So this one will water your plants faster. So for this, I think I only ran it for 5 minutes every morning, and the more you twist up, the more water will come out at a time. So what's good about this is if you have plants hooked up to the same drip line, some of them need more water, some of them want less, you can adjust whichever emitter is at that plant based on how much water it wants. Now, if you're using the Proven Winners drip system, then you would just put more drip emitters around plants that needed more water. I also think, and again, I don't know if this is 100% true, but I think with the drip system, kind of giving your plants less water, or water that's emitted more slowly, allows it to absorb better than like run through the pot. But again, I don't know exactly if there is a huge scientific difference between the amount of water they get with this or with the drip system. And I think cost-wise, they were about the same. I like the kit from Proven Winners because it gives you everything you need in one kit, and then you can kind of expand which pieces you need or don't need, and it's a good way to kind of just get used to an irrigation system in general. So yes, I have a drip system, and yes, I would recommend it to everyone that can set one up, and I will be setting mine up probably in the next few weeks because it seems like we're going from winter weather to summer weather here, so I need to get my drip system hooked up sooner rather than later. So I'll take you along with that as well. And then the last question was, and this wasn't really a question that's been asked a lot, but I did want to clarify in case people didn't know, but do I actually live in Chicago and not in a suburb? And yes, I'm inside the city limits of Chicago. As a person who grew up about an hour away in Northwest Indiana, I learned from a very early age that if you live in the suburbs of a city and you tell someone in that city you're from that city, they will very swiftly correct you. So I learned not to say I was from Chicago when I grew up in Northwest Indiana, and now that I am in Chicago, yes, I do live in the city and I am from Chicago. Actually, I think this month is my 10-year anniversary of moving into the city. So that's kind of exciting. I've been here the majority of my adult life. But I think that is everything that I had for this video. If there are other questions, let me know below and I'll respond to you there. And if I get a ton of questions kind of in the next couple months, I'll put together another video like this. So thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.